Thank you for joining us. I'm Joe Arnold, president of the Louisville Forum. We meet on the second Wednesday of each month at Vincenzo's Restaurant in downtown Louisville, and all are welcome. The Louisville Forum is a nonpartisan public issues group founded in 1984. The Forum hosts debates and discussions of contemporary and sometimes controversial public policy issues that affect the greater Louisville community. Although we may take up issues that have a national interest, we try to highlight, as always, the local perspective. For more information on the Louisville Forum, our programs, or to make reservations, please visit louisvilleforum.org. Our program today is The State of West Louisville. I should point out, I got an email clarifying that West Louisville is not a state. So, duly noted, okay?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Not yet.
DeVone says not yet. Okay, well, save it for your remarks, okay. When you say West Louisville, though, or the West End, or when you say East End or South End, every Louisvillian has their own impression of what these wide areas are all about. The lesson I remember, I see my friend Rachel in the back from WHIS, from our days as a journalist, we had a little map on our newsroom stations that showed all 9 neighborhoods of the West End to realize this is not just one block. These are unique characteristics of each neighborhood with historic and important places. So the biggest challenge I had and our board had in creating today's panel is that West Louisville is blessed with many relevant and integral voices and viewpoints, and frankly, sadly, too many for one Louisville Forum panel. But we are so fortunate to have these folks with us today, these 4 panelists who represent some significant recent developments, some historic connections, and a sincere interest. And in the interest of time, and begging all of your indulgence, gentlemen, I have condensed your impressive backgrounds into some brief introductions. Beginning to my right, first elected to the Metro Council in 2010, David James is now serving a 5th term as council president. His career in law enforcement began with Louisville Police in 1984. He served as a military intelligence specialist with the U.S. Army Reserves and as commissioner of the Kentucky Bureau of Investigation, the investigative arm of the Kentucky Attorney General's office. Kevin Fields Sr. is the president and CEO of Louisville Central Community Centers. Trained as a civil engineer, urban planner, public policy specialist, his goal is to facilitate community solutions on critical policy areas including education, workforce development, housing, and urban development. At LCCC, Mr. Fields provides organizational and community leadership while helping to raise that organization's profile as a major catalyst for change. To my left here, Dr. Kelly C. McCants, he is both the executive medical director of the Norton Heart and Vascular Institute Advanced Heart Failure and Recovery Program. Take a breath. And the executive director of the Norton Institute for Health Equity. You get a round of applause just for both of those titles. As he treats patients facing difficult health challenges, he addresses health disparities and applies his personal experience of inequities and racism. Through his work with heart failure patients, Dr. McCants learned the power of addressing socioeconomic dynamics to help patients recover. Since 2019, DeVone Holt has served as Vice President of External Affairs for Goodwill Industries of Kentucky, where he oversees marketing, communications, public relations, fundraising, advertising, and government affairs functions. DeVone has distinguished himself as an economic development professional, workforce services agent, business consultant, community relations expert for Jefferson County Schools, a best-selling author, the host of a radio show, a church leader. Before we get to your questions, we have asked each panelist to make opening remarks, and who better to set the standard for brief remarks than a politician? Let's begin with Council President David James. Thank you, sir.
All right, no pressure.
That's right.
Keep it brief. Hi, everybody, and welcome. I want to recognize Anthony Piagentini, one of my colleagues on the Metro Council, and another elected official, Mike O'Connell, our county attorney. Thanks for being here, guys. There we go. Before we get started, I just want to acknowledge for a moment the state that we're in right now in the world, not West Louisville. And I just want to say to us that I think tonight when we go home that we should pray. and that we should pray for our president, and that we should pray for the president of Ukraine, and we should pray for Putin. And that we should pray for our young people and our soldiers that are going to be put in harm's way, because things are going to change, and there will be sacrifices made, and we all need to recognize that. Thank you. So, we're here to talk about West Louisville, and as a councilman of the 6th District, I represent, or have represented, things changed a little bit with redistricting, the California neighborhood, Victory Park area, Park Hill, and many parts of West Louisville. I grew up in West Louisville as a child on South 43rd Street. When I grew up on South 43rd Street, I would ride my bicycle through the neighborhoods, and my parents felt relatively safe letting me do that. And I knew the neighbors knew me, the neighbors knew my mom's phone number to call and tell on me, and the businesses knew me. I could stop in and see Mr. Jones at the store, and he would give me candy, and he would tell my dad later in the week that you owe me 30 cents because David came and got some candy. And that's not the West Louisville that I see right now in many parts. We have 9 different neighborhoods, and those neighborhoods are very unique and distinct in the way that they function. And I would say that now when I drive through West Louisville, I see a tremendous number of abandoned vacant properties. I see graffiti. I see crimes taking place. But I also see a bunch of proud people that want their neighborhoods to be better. And they are wanting to do anything that they can do to make it better. And they've watched people come and tell them that we're going to make it better. Just vote for me and I'll set you free. And nothing happened. And then they come back 4 years later and say the same thing. And so there is some distrust with government in West Louisville. West Louisville also currently has a big problem with gun violence and a lot of young people being killed and shot. As of yesterday, I think we had 31 homicides for the year. I can remember we had 31 homicides for an entire year when I first started as a council person. And so all of that is unacceptable. But on the other side of things, we have good news that's happening in West Louisville. Just last week, I was present with DeVone, Holt, and Dr. McCants as they announced, I'm probably stealing some of their thunder, as they announced the Norton's Goodwill partnership down at 28th and Broadway, which I have to tell you, I think is going to be one of the best things that's ever happened in West Louisville. Thank you very much. For those that don't know, it'll be the first hospital to be built in West Louisville in over 100 years. So thank you. It's amazing. And so we have other good things that are happening. We have the YMCA at 18th and Broadway. We have the Urban League doing great work in West Louisville. We have a new JCPS school being built right next to the YMCA at 18th and Broadway. And so there are a lot of things that are happening because people are focused on West Louisville and trying to make things better. We have the West End Opportunity Partnership, which will be great for West Louisville. We have a lot of synergy towards fixing West Louisville and enabling the people of West Louisville to be able to make West Louisville better, which I think is best. I don't know that it's really great for people to say, we know what's going to make you better, right? And so I think that as we go forward, I'll be a good politician and be quiet, but that's my 4 minutes.
Good afternoon. Let me thank Joe Arnold and great to follow Councilman David James. I'm Kevin Fields. I'm the CEO at Louisville Central Community Center. And I do want to say that this is a sacred time in my week because normally at noon every Wednesday I'm in the barber chair. And you all can tell I'm high maintenance, so I'm missing my weekly barber appointment. But I did call my barber, and I said to him that I've been called upon to talk about the state of West Louisville. And so I need you to tell me, because he's on 23rd and Broadway, from your perspective, what does it look like? I've lived, worked, and worshiped in the Russell neighborhood for about all of my life, but I don't get to see it on the ground level like my barber does. So Sean, my barber, said, well, it's hopeful, but we've got a ways to go before we can really take pride in living in West Louisville and doing business in West Louisville, but it's hopeful. And so I think a part of my message today is to talk about what's the foundation of hope in West Louisville. As an organization, Louisville Central Community Centers has been at the forefront of advancing economic empowerment within West Louisville for most of our existence. We were founded in 1948. And for most of our existence, we've been squarely focused on addressing poverty. And we know that poverty is an economic measure that we're all concerned about, and as an organization, we've been trying to eradicate ourselves in the community setting of poverty ever since we've been in existence. But we began to learn over our existence that we were preservers of poverty if and only if all we did was serve poor families and helping them to be stable and poor at the same time. And so we started talking about economic transformation a number of years ago. And I look at DeVone because he was a part of our organization back in those days. And we started first talking about the Old Walnut Street campaign, the Old Walnut Street vision, knowing that Walnut Street was once a thriving economic corridor. So you fast forward to today at Old Walnut Street at 1300 Ali, we're focused primarily on advancing economic empowerment. And everything that we talk about when it comes to West Louisville is all about advancing equity through economic empowerment. And so I'm glad to be able to talk about it today. I'm glad to be at the Louisville Forum talking about it because I learned from Joe that there's opportunities to join this forum. I must say, in a 40-year career, I've never been to the Louisville Forum. I don't know what that says about me, but I also want to say I'm also proud to be a Rotarian. Any Rotarians here? All right, so I chair the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee of the Louisville Downtown Rotary, and I want to invite you to also consider being a member. There, we're talking about economic empowerment at that conversation. Any members of the Louisville Branch NAACP? Raise your hand. Thank you. Well, I chair the Economic Development Committee for the local branch NAACP, and we need members, right? We have a huge opportunity to advocate for economic development, economic empowerment within our black community, but we need, to increase our bandwidth to increase our impact. So I want to invite you to go out to the website and become a dues-paying member. You don't have to show up to one meeting to be a dues-paying member. Just be a dues-paying member. We will invite you to come to meetings and be a part of it. The hope for West Louisville is to really be strategic and intentional about advancing economic empowerment in West Louisville. We can talk about all the other social dynamics and people coming together in fellowship and working together and being diverse as corporations and looking at things through the economic or the racial equity lens. All of that's great. But economic empowerment is what we need. And I say this not only just in terms of investing in projects, but also investing in the fabric of our community. And that starts at the household level, but it also goes up to the institutional level. We need strong black-led institutions. And so we're very proud of the work that's happening when you think about Simmons College of Kentucky, the HBCU that's strong and growing, getting stronger. When you think about organizations like Louisville Urban League and the sports complex and all the great work that Sadiqa Reynolds is doing. You look at what DeVone and the team at Goodwill are leading in partnership with Norton. All of that is strategic. All of that's intended to advance economic empowerment as well as health, Dr. McCants. We know we want to deal with the health disparities as well. But I'll stop with this. Every basic human need has its core centered around economics. And there are gross economic disparities when you look at it from a geographic standpoint in West Louisville, when you consider the fact that, you know, households in West Louisville, average median income is about a third of eastern part of our county. That's a real issue. So if we don't hit right there, how do we increase household income? How do we make sure we have stable, thriving institutions, and certainly support all the organizations that are at the forefront and have been for a long time advancing that? So I know that's my time, Joe, but I'll stand. So wrap it up?
Yeah.
All right, I'm done.
So, good afternoon, and I'm glad I followed you because I was wondering what am I going to say as an introduction, and I wrote down a few words, but I think you started off right. I'm here to talk about healthcare, but if you have economic deprivation, you're going to have health inequity. It goes hand in hand, and I know we're at the Louisville Forum, but you see it in almost every city where there's economic deprivation, you see disparities in healthcare. And so thanks for the alley-oop, I appreciate that. So, Mr. President, this is also my first time coming to the Louisville Forum. And so I spoke with Leadership Louisville yesterday, and that was my first time there. But what I want to say is that it's so important that you have programs like this and institutions like this, because we have to discuss the concerns. A lot of times we read about it in the newspaper, but if we're not having conversations about how to improve, then we're really not doing anything. So thanks for the platform. You started out introducing me with a lot of titles. That's good, but I'm a servant first. I think you can't lead if you don't know how to serve. So to the students in the room, you have some powerful people in here, and I bet you that most of the people in here are servants first. Your servant towel must be bigger than your ego. And so I represent Norton Healthcare. I represent the Institute for Health Equity. And without the leadership of Norton Healthcare and Russ Cox and our leadership team, we couldn't do any of this. And so I may be standing here representing the Institute for Health Equity, but it was his brainchild. He was the one that got the entire institution moving in the same direction so that we eliminate disparities in Louisville. Now, I'm not a Louisville native. I grew up in Jacksonville, Florida. But Jacksonville, Florida is a lot like Louisville because there's economic deprivation and there's geographic segregation. And so when you mentioned I had lived experiences, the experiences weren't from Louisville, it was from Jacksonville, Florida. This past week I was in Savannah giving an equity talk, and guess what? In Savannah, there's economic deprivation and there's health disparities. 2 months before that, I was in Knoxville, Tennessee. Guess what? Economic deprivation, healthcare disparities. And so even though I'm not from Louisville, I don't want to hear Louisville associated with healthcare disparities any longer. And so I think what we're doing with Goodwill and the Opportunity Campus is phenomenal, but we're here to serve. We're here to eliminate barriers and disparities, but we can't do it alone. And so I hope we have some great conversation. I'm open to all questions. There's someone from our marketing team here to make sure that my remarks are what they should be. And so when it's appropriate, I will respond on behalf of Norton Healthcare. And then sometimes I will respond on behalf of Dr. McCants. Thank you.
I want to hear Dr. Good afternoon. Like my friend Kevin Fields, this is sacred time for me as well. Typically on a Wednesday afternoon, I will be at the gym with my trainer right now. DeVone Means, best trainer in the world. I've lost 30 pounds with him, and I walked past the mirror one day and saw a muscle. So you know he's good. So you know he's good. But I'm not with him today. Instead, I am at Vincenzo's. So Joe told you to take pictures, but don't take a picture of me putting food in my mouth because I'm sure my trainer will see that, and I'll pay the price when I go back on Friday. My name is DeVone Holt. I am all the things that Joe read off that list, but most importantly, I am Aaron Holt's dad. He's a 12-year-old kid at Mazik Middle School who is going to make a huge impact on the world. I'm convinced of it. And part of that is because I'm spending time introducing him to people and places that give him a diverse look at life. Aaron Holt lives in the heart of the Shawnee neighborhood in West Louisville. And he gets to see everything we talk about today up close and in person. He sees the disparities that exist in his neighborhood compared to when we visit friends of his in other neighborhoods. And as a 12-year-old kid, he starts to understand that something's wrong here. 12 years old. At 12 years old, he recognizes that there's an imbalance. It's funny to me how a 12-year-old can get that, and sometimes we as adults miss it. But today we're going to talk about how we can help set that table straight. It's good to see that this room is at capacity today, Joe. And I'll tell you why, because I started working in economic development at GLI, the Chamber of Commerce, 2001. And I took a job there serving as the West Louisville Economic Development Director. And let me tell you something, it was a lonely job. I couldn't fill up a room like this. There was no interest. There was no desire. I had to chase, beg, borrow, steal to get people to even look west of 9th Street. But today, we've got a new table. We've got a new environment. We've got a new interest. And that's because I'm convinced of the work that my friend Kevin has done. Our council president, David James, has been pounding the pavement, and a lot of others who've committed to do the hard work that doesn't always find itself in the front of spotlights and cameras, that finds itself in rooms where you are often rejected before you are embraced, in rooms where you have to show that there is an overabundant amount of opportunity before someone will look at you in a favorable way. But we've done it. We've done it. We've done it. And I will tell you what David mentioned to you that happened a few weeks ago, where we stood with Norton Healthcare and made an announcement to bring $100 million to the corner of 28th and Broadway, was no small feat.
Amen.
It's a big deal.
Amen.
It's a big deal. And it's not only a big deal because of what Goodwill and Norton will do. We are going to do something transformative. Not only are we going to transform the corner of 28th and Broadway that has for decades been an eyesore, brownfield site with a dilapidated building that just continued to deteriorate year after year. We are going to transform that into a bright beacon of hope. It will transcend West Louisville. I promise you that. But not only will we transform the corner, the work that we will do inside of the facilities on the corner of 28th and Broadway will also transform the people who live in West Louisville. And I need you to hear this well, because so much of what we talk about when we talk about impacting communities happens in one of two ways. It's either an investment in the people who live in the community to make their lives better. And those are legitimate, necessary investments. But if it's not an investment in the people, it's typically an investment in the place of West Louisville. Amen. Investing in the infrastructure, the environment to make it more amenable to people who live in the area and to potentially attract more people to the area. What we're doing on the corner of 28th and Broadway does both. And you don't get projects that do that very often. We not only get a chance to transform the place, but we get to significantly invest in the people. That's why this is so special. But then when you add the fact that what we've already done and what we've already announced in just 2 weeks has already began to serve as a catalyst for more investment in West Louisville. Because guess what started to happen? You announced $100 million coming to West Louisville, and people start to look. They start to poke around. Well, I can guarantee you that there will be more announcements to come. There will be more investments to follow. And our friend David James said this in a private meeting. I'm going to share this publicly, but you said it, and it resonated with me, and I believe it to be true. He said, I believe in 10 years from now, when people look back and ask the question, when did West Louisville take a huge turn for the better, it's going to be when Norton Healthcare and Goodwill invested $100 million in the corner of West Louisville. So I need you guys to know that you are now associated with the beginning of something great. But the reality is, as much as we've invested into that corner of 28th and Broadway, there's still a lot more support that we need from people in this room to help make it happen. I took my glasses off, so I can't see if that's Frank Harshaw. Is that Frank there? Raise your hand, Frank. Frank is, God bless him. He's not Norton Healthcare. He's not Goodwill. He's one man. And he has been making significant investments in that community to do good in the Parkland neighborhood of West Louisville. And so today, if I leave without having said anything else, Joe, it's that we need more people to follow Frank Harshaw's walk and talk. Thank you.
Very good. So my presidency is off to an inauspicious beginning. I apparently underestimated the crowd, and I forgot which board members volunteered to ask questions for me. So I'm going to assign you from, this is like a field commission, all right? Tom Van Der Rostein, please stand. And if you have a question that's already written out, please raise your hands, and he'll collect those from you right now. Tom, if you wouldn't do that, if you wouldn't mind doing that. If you have any other volunteers from board members to help him out, that'd be great. And I'm gonna start the questions here while we're collecting those right now, and go to you, Dr. McCants, because we've referenced the huge investment with the hospital, but I want to make sure that we understand what it is. So if you wouldn't mind just kind of filling us in on what that is and what your hopes are and what Norton Healthcare's hopes are for that, I think that'd be a good way for us to start the conversation.
Great. You guys can hear me? Yes. So that's a great question, and every 3 years we do a community needs assessment at Norton Healthcare. In fact, as a part of the Affordable Care Act, each non-for-profit healthcare organization should be doing a community needs assessment. And in that needs assessment, it's simple. We ask a series of questions. We look at the data, the Health Equity Report of Louisville. We talk to as many people from the city as possible, patients, everybody, to find out what's needed. And the good news is, for the last 6 years, the community needs assessment has been fairly similar. In fact, I reviewed over 150 community needs assessments from across the country, and they all look the same. Which means, again, when you're in an area that has economic deprivation, historical disinvestment, and you talk about health care, you need access. Access is number one, access is number two, access is number three. You have to make sure that you focus on chronic disease management, hypertension, diabetes, primary care, pediatric services, and then finally, things have to be affordable. And so what we're hoping to do there is bring access. Number one, we know that folks from vulnerable communities don't have transportation to always come downtown, certainly not to come to Audubon, where I hang my jacket, if you will. And so we want to make sure that geographically we are in the community, number one. I can't give you any dimensions in terms of square footage and so forth. That's made by people above my pay grade. Okay. But I can tell you we will have primary care there. We will have pediatric services there. We will have women's health services. Most of the people in West Louisville that have economic challenges are women and children. And so if we don't service that community, then that's an issue. We also will have specialty care. I met with the Federal Qualified Healthcare Center yesterday, Family Health Centers, met with Shawnee, and the message is the same. Even if you have good access to primary care, there's no specialty care in the West End. So why can't we bring cardiology services? Why can't we bring nephrology or kidney services? Why can't we bring endocrinology or diabetic services to West Louisville? So hope that, ER, so we'll be a ER present. We're still figuring out the bed count, 25, 30 beds, but we want to make sure that there is access in a full-service hospital in West Louisville.
Thank you very much. I'm going to get right to our questions. There's a lot of them, I can tell. Tom, thanks for your Battlefield Commission.
Thank you. This is for all of the different members on the panel. This is a question from a Shawnee High School student. How will the new track facility in West Louisville be used to further enhance the quality of life for West Louisville and for any or all?
Anyone have a comment on the track facility and how it's going to help? Kevin?
Well, I won't speak on behalf of the Urban League, but who administers that program there, but I can say from a community perspective, the way that track and field empowers and enhances the quality of life in West Louisville, it becomes an economic magnet that attracts individuals who hopefully will find ways to use some of their disposable income while they're visiting to do business in West Louisville. I rode by the track last week and I saw rows of school buses from counties all over the state of Kentucky, and I saw students who I know didn't live in that neighborhood running around the track, warming up, getting ready for their events. And I thought, wow, that is a phenomenon that we have not seen. And so it's only because the track is there that we see that. And so that is the beginning of economic change and economic transformation. It is a job creator. There are jobs there that did not exist. And there will be a lot of economic spinoff to that. So that's the way it looks from a community perspective.
I'll also mention folks tuning on to ESPN can actually see some of the track events there. So there's a national presence there as well. Could I ask Tom Coffey for the next question? Is that okay?
Oh, yes. Thanks, Joe. This one asks, do you know about the upcoming Maple Street Park and 22nd and Maple Street by the Park Alliance?
Council.
Yep. So this is not in my district anymore. It was in my district. Now it's in Councilman Arthur's district. But on Maple Street and near 23rd, 24th, it historically flooded quite frequently. And so MSD applied for FEMA relief, and FEMA relief funds came to buy up approximately 100 properties there. We cannot build a permanent structure back on it as a part of receiving the funds, and so a park is what is going to be there, and the Park Foundation is working with the community to talk about what that's going to look like. I believe in this year's budget we put, I think, $500,000 in funding to help get that started.
Tom?
Thank you.
Oh,
This
yeah.
question,
One more
sorry.
comment.
So I knew a little bit about the Maple Street Park earlier, but when I think about parks, I don't want us to leave this room just thinking that it's a park. So in West Louisville, there is no green space. And when you start looking at the role of tree canopy, again, if you look at all those cities that we talked about that had challenges in economic deprivation and health disparities, they also had challenges in tree canopy. Well, trees do good things, right? They provide oxygen. And there's an inverse relationship between trees and air pollution, cancer risk, and asthma. So if you wonder why asthma is so high in neighborhoods that have been historically disinvested in, it's because of lack of tree canopy. So don't underestimate the importance of having that park there. Obviously, exercise is important. I can't be a cardiologist and not say that. But for everyone else to understand that trees are important, and when you start to look at communities that don't have green space, it further contributes to disease burden.
Thank you. This question is for any or all of the panelists. Regarding the West Louisville Opportunity Fund, how will you balance increasing investment in West Louisville against the impact on local residents, particularly focusing on low-income residents and those on fixed income?
Anyone? Council President, then we'll go to DeVone.
Oh, Council President, your chair, I'll follow you, sir.
All right. DeVone and I both serve on the board. So what I would say to that is that part of the law that created the West End Opportunity Partnership locks in the property taxes for the residents that live there and for their descendants for the next 20 years, so that gentrification is not a major effect for them. Now there is a conversation about what about those that rent, and we still have to work on that. I hope that answered the question. I'll turn the rest
No,
over to
I
DeVone.
think you hit it right on. I think the one thing I will add to that is that, you know, we have an opportunity to do something unique here in Louisville with this TIF district. I know, you know, some people have looked at TIF districts and they operate with varying levels of success depending on where you point to. But I think here we have Council President David James and I sit on a board that has a unique opportunity to massage this TIF district in a way that serves the community, not just for the present time, but for the foreseeable future. That comes through us being creative, flexible in the way that we leverage this tool. And our hope is that through conversations with the community, we can get to a point where we figure out the best solution. But I'm convinced that there is a solution. I'm not going to pretend that I know exactly what that is, but what I am not interested in doing is backing away from a beautiful opportunity to leverage resources to invest in a community that has been overlooked and underserved for quite a long time.
And if I could add to that, because I think the underlying concern is how does it impact current residents of West Louisville? What are the opportunities or what are the hardships that might emerge? And I've had the unique vantage point of working with the West End Opportunity Partnership as a collaborator in hosting a series of Thursday night conversations over the past 8 months, period, and I've heard mixed opinion about it. But one of the things that it inspired us to do from Louisville Central's standpoint is we recognize that, as DeVone stated and Councilman James stated, that this is unprecedented, a commitment to reinvest in a neighborhood, 9 neighborhoods that have been historically divested in over several decades, and here we are looking at an opportunity to turn around and do something very innovative in responding to that. So how do we as a community prepare ourselves to be ready for that unprecedented investment? So we created what we call the Purpose-Driven Developer Academy, with the idea that we want to build a community of community builders that we can take advantage of these investments. And I'm pleased that our leader is in the room. Tiffany Williams is leading our facilitation of that academy. And there's a lot of interest in development in West Louisville that's being led by Black business leaders, whether they're developers, real estate entities. There's a lot of interest in that. So I just say that there is a balanced perspective that we need to have when we look at this West End Opportunity Partnership. The fact that it's unprecedented is we can't back away from it, as DeVone said.
Before our next question from the audience, I want to ask you, DeVone, fill us in briefly, if we could, what is the Opportunity Campus in the first place for Goodwill?
I'm glad you asked that, Joe. Thank you. That gives me a chance to briefly talk about what we're proposing. So Goodwill is committed to creating this Opportunity Campus, and it is a new model in the city of Louisville and the state of Kentucky that allows us to create sort of a one-stop shop for people to rebuild their lives, so to speak. And essentially what we're creating is a one-stop shop lifestyle enrichment campus. And it's our way of bringing not only the Goodwill services, and my hope is that most people here now know that Goodwill is a whole heck of a lot more than just retail stores. We use the funds that we generate from our retail stores. So when you donate jeans and your clothes that are too small or too big, we take those, we sell them, and reinvest those dollars into programs that help put Kentucky's hardest to serve job seekers on a pathway to prosperity. And that takes a lot of work and effort. It doesn't happen easily, but we do that through our programs and services. So we're bringing that to the campus, but we realize that if we're going to be serious about helping people find pathways to prosperity, we can't do it alone. And so we're creating a campus where we have co-located partners like Big Brothers Big Sisters is going to do mentoring, Volunteers of America that's going to do restorative justice on site. The Kentuckiana Works Workforce Development operation is going to be co-located there. We'll have a community cafeteria. Kentucky College of Barbering is going to be giving free haircuts to people who want to freshen up their appearance. I mean, it is a holistic approach to serving people in ways that this community has never seen before, all under a 120,000 square foot roof, where we'll also be able to welcome the community to come in and utilize space for resource centers and reception areas and meeting spaces and all of those things. So it's a community asset is what we're building.
Thank you. Tom.
Actually, perfect segue. We got several questions about retail in particular. One is what is the biggest need for retail in the West End? What is the impact on retail with this project? And another one asked specifically, if I'm reading this right, why have groceries had a hard time to succeed in the West End?
Anyone? I can assign. Kevin?
Well, I think the latter part of the question, why is it difficult for a retailer, whether it be groceries, why is it difficult to succeed in West Louisville? It's really a simple problem, and I mentioned it in the remarks earlier, it's lack of disposable income. When you're located in an area that your customer base does not have the ability to sustain you, then you're going to struggle. And we've seen sit-down restaurants come and go over time. Even the best laid plan with the greatest intentions has the potential to struggle, and that's why it's important when we were looking at Walmart coming to 18th and Broadway for a period of time, and I know many of you have shopped at Walmart, and if I were to take a poll, I would ask how many of you have driven more than 10 miles to get to a Walmart? Many of you would say, yeah. So if you locate at 18th and Broadway, in order for Walmart to be viable, they have to draw from a market, a surrounding region, and that's what it takes to sustain that business. It's the same concept for any retailer. You have to be able to attract a customer base from a regional perspective. And let's face it, there are phobias about West Louisville. And so we've got to overcome that myth. We've got to raise income at the household level. That means we got to diversify income, right? We can raise income and we can also diversify income. How do you diversify? Well, you got to attract people to come back to West Louisville. There's a lot of people who have left West Louisville because they were economically able to, but they would come back. Park Duval proved that. When we tore down public housing and replaced it with new housing, we brought people back to the community. Right. So I think a lot has to go into thinking about why retailers would locate and stay and be sustainable in any location. You got to have a customer base.
Joe, just real quick, I'd like to respond to. We at Goodwill were, I'd like to think, smart and wise enough not to just show up in West Louisville and say we're here. We spent 6 months engaging the community, and that led to thousands upon thousands of responses from people in the community who responded to questions that we asked about what they liked about West Louisville, what they desired for the community. what challenges the community has, what amenities they'd like to see in the community. We also asked them what they felt like Goodwill needed to do to be a good neighbor when we moved in. But that is all captured in, I brought 80 of these. I'm not sure if everybody got a chance to get one.
For those folks watching on Metro TV, what's your website? We can go and check out the report there.
GoodwillWestLouisville.com.
GoodwillWestLouisville.com.
GoodwillWestLouisville.com. You can find this West Louisville Community Engagement Report. And on page 11, we asked the question, what physical amenities are most needed to improve West Louisville? The number one response was retail and shopping center. It was the number one response. And as someone who lives in West Louisville, I will tell you, I hate having to drive miles out of the way to go get soap and deodorant. You know, so there's a need for it in the community, indeed.
Thank you. This is another question from a high school student. How can the board help with public transportation as well as district transportation for adults and children in West Louisville?
Anyone? Don't all raise your hands at once.
Let's let the cardiologist comment about transportation. So I don't have the answer for what the board can do, but I can tell you what it's a continued problem. So if to get to Audubon Hospital, you need, or Brownsboro Hospital, or any of the hospitals that I frequent, you need 2 bus trips. And trying to be on time to see your doctor who's got 15 minutes and a full waiting room, what do you think happens if you're late because your bus didn't arrive? Now those same 2 bus trips you took to become a no-show, guess what? You get to take the same 2 trips back. And so I don't know how to fix it, but I can tell you that it affects every aspect of a patient's life or a community member's life that we need to discuss here.
Got a more fact-specific one here. Someone's asking about the corner of 18th and Broadway, where they feel that the Passport is a eyesore.
As it is now, I would absolutely agree. But I will say that's a highly visible corner in West Louisville. 18th and Broadway, you get traffic going up 18th Street all the way to Fort Knox from there. And then you can travel east to west to go from Shawnee High School, or Shawnee Park, quite frankly, to Cave Hill Cemetery. And so you can cover a good span by crossing that intersection. My understanding is there's still efforts underway to develop that property, and I wouldn't be surprised if we heard something soon.
Oh, I like that. Jeez.
Thank you. This is for Dr. McCants. I have I'm going to kind of put 2 questions together, if I may, sir. We have 2 separate questions. Will the new facility offer addiction rehabilitation services? And also, with the immediate shortage of healthcare professionals, how will you staff the hospital fully?
That's a good question.
Great question.
I want to hear how you
Yeah. And so let me just tell you that we don't have all the answers. I do know that when I leave here tomorrow, our leadership team has started a weekly meeting to figure out exactly what we need to do to help staff this hospital. You know, staffing issues are big right now in healthcare across the United States. COVID changed a lot of that for us. But we do know that we need people from the community to staff that hospital as much as possible. Now, when you start thinking about workforce development, we would love to staff that hospital with as many Black and brown providers that we can find. But guess what? I represent 5%. 5%. So to be an African-American physician, you represent 5% of the workforce. So not only do we have to find them, we have to develop them. And so we're currently building pipelines with Meharry Medical College, Morehouse, to make sure we get black and brown providers here. But we need to also make sure that there's programs at place at Simmons College, Kentucky State, to make sure that medical programming from the folks that live in the community can staff that hospital.
Thank you.
There's a concern of gentrification. If there's a lot of new projects that go into the West End where people had otherwise not considered moving there before, now suddenly may become a hot place to move. There's a concern of protecting the people who have been living in Louisville for a long time. Are there any efforts in place to protect those residents?
So that is a concern, and I will tell you, President James and I sit with a group of people who are trying to do our best to protect against that and make sure that, first off, people who live in West Louisville have the ability to stay if that becomes their choice. But the real challenge, and we can do that, I mean, and that's probably an easier pathway for us to navigate through than the other one, which is how do you help preserve the greatest amount of residents in West Louisville who are renters? Because as renters, you don't own that property, and it's harder to help them make a claim and a stake to stay in the community. And that leads us then into some conversations about how do you regulate rent in some cases to make sure that it doesn't become out of control. And so those are conversations that we're having. I'm not going to pretend that we've found the right solutions or the answers, but I do know that those are concerns and those are discussions that we're having, trying to figure out the best way to solve those problems to make sure that the people who help make West Louisville a beautiful place and love it and call it home can continue to do that. And so we carry that burden of trying to figure that out.
Thank you. I'm coming back to you again, Doctor. Sorry about that.
I'm not a doctor.
I'm not trying to pick on you here, but
Can I talk to you about heart transplant or something?
sorry. There's a lot of questions. In addition to building the hospital in the West End, how is Norton Healthcare working to ensure access to this facility? How are you working within the community to invest in this facility?
Great. So I'm going to respond as Kelly McCants and not Norton Healthcare. So let me just say that I'm extremely proud to be a provider at Norton Healthcare because some of the things that we've done historically, but particularly over the last 2 years, to prove that we are investing in Louisville and West Louisville has been phenomenal. First, we talked about the YMCA 18th and Broadway. That was a significant investment, and we understood that when COVID came, that was one of the facilities where we launched our vaccination sites. We erected the Institute for Health Equity, which I lead on 12th and Jefferson, and we were careful to make sure that that was a site-based investment situated in the Russell community so that we can do exactly what we're doing here. Have conversations with community-based organizations to make sure that Norton Healthcare isn't coming in with the big N saying we know everything. And so that's an extremely important investment. Again, it's the Institute for Health Equity at 12th and Jefferson. Next, partnerships with Simmons College. We provided some resources to Simmons College and St. Stephen's Life Center, because those will also be places where we will have prompt care services situated in the California neighborhood. And as of late, we announced support to Bates in the Smoketown community, $1.4 million, to make sure that we're not just focused on one particular area. You identified 9 neighborhoods. And so the investment of Norton Healthcare has been quite significant, and this is all just in the last couple of years. And so the hospital at $70 million is a significant investment, but we started down this pathway way before the hospital. Thank you.
Let me just add to that because, what we're doing on that corner of 28th and Broadway is a partnership. And because of that, what we're working through now are some community engagement sessions where we're going to rent out some gyms and some community centers and invite the community to come in and hear about this project, to ask questions, and then to help them understand what it is we're bringing collectively, Norton and Goodwill, to the table as an offering to the community to make sure that they are engaged in this process and have the potential to benefit from it as well, even beginning with the construction phase, trying to make sure that we carve off a proper amount of work that will be associated with the project for people who live in the community and minority businesses in the community. So we're working through that process now. We'll begin a listening tour with the community in the next month or so, tag teaming with Norton. So there'll be a lot of engagement along the way.
One final question.
There's a lot of great questions here, but the last one we have is the ownership, entrepreneurship by West Louisvillians and particularly the black community.
You want to start with that, Kevin?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I think that's at the core of a lot of concerns around investment is who benefits, who gets empowered. And so we certainly advocate that black ownership is critically important as we invest in West Louisville from a business standpoint, from a housing standpoint. We want to make sure that those that benefit are those that are historically connected to West Louisville, that are indigenous to West Louisville. And so that we have to be intentional about that. We really have to be intentional about that. One of the concerns about gentrification that I'll add on is that, you know, we don't want to see the case get made that West Louisville is worthy of investment, and those investments are made based on the demographic data that represent blight and economic distress that we know is represented by black people. But then when the investments come, if we look up and see non-blacks get empowered, then that's a real concern. That's a legitimate concern. So we do need to be intentional about that, and I think that's one of the things we advocate for, is that and that's why we have a micro business incubator that's squarely focused on developing black businesses. Many others are doing the same. Melner Marketplace, the Russell Business Tech Incubator that Dave Christopher does, Jedi, all of us are in that business of making sure that black businesses have a path toward prosperity. And so there won't be any excuses. And so, but we want to be intentional that we invest and target those businesses.
Well, the key to the Louisville Forum is being able to find credible voices to be able to inform us and enlighten us about our community. I cannot think of a better panel than you four right now, so thank you. Fantastic. Okay. The doctor's asking for a closing remark. You're the only one who gets one, though.
Well, I said I was very opinionated anyway, so, but I wanted to
Is this on your behalf or Norton?
I just wanted to respond to the homeownership comment. So there is a direct line between homeownership and healthcare. If you look at all demographics, all populations, those that have homeownership have less burden of disease. And so if, again, go back to what we started with economic deprivation, if you don't support the economy and develop homeowners in that community, it will be quite challenging for us to improve healthcare disparities. Thank you.